And we're in. How very exciting. Ladies and gentlemen, this is particularly exciting because I have a glorious, lovely old friend, and he's gorgeous, and he's Mike Akers, writer, actor, teacher, recliner, never afraid to lean back and take the foot off the gas. Also a man who I'm delighted to say I've been in Instant Wit with for many years, and we also go to a wonderful place called Les Sur Anglais, which is the English Sisters, where we do some comedy improvisation workshops once a year, and Mike and I have got a really lovely groove in doing that. Also, I love the fact that you've laughed in the face of haircuts during the lockdown.
Yeah, haircuts are over as far as I'm concerned. That's it with haircuts. Never again.
And just talk us through the recliner part, which I found genuinely really funny when I just read that this morning. So I decided to give you.
So I am involved. I love football, and I run the largest veterans football franchise in the UK, as far as I'm aware. And we're called Recliners FC, and we've got numerous teams from over 35s, over 45s, over 50s, and we play. We're just old men playing football, basically. And
the very sadly recently departed Nobby Stiles was probably one of the lineup, I'm sure.
Yes, we're trying to sign him up. We're in negotiations.
And one of the Charlton brothers could be there, but is a bit bewildered at the moment, which is very sad, I know, as well.
Yes, it was really sad news about Sir Bobby, who obviously is a great icon of the game.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And talking of icons, we just have to look at you to see why you are an icon, Mr. Mike Akers. Also, you are the making of my Christmas every year, not because you come down my chimney, but because you also run this wonderful thing that I know will tragically be on ice for this year, but it's Reverend Lemon. Just talk us through what that is, because it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, so the Reverend Lemon is a band that I'm in and have been in for many years. And when we started off, we were young and we were kind of serious, and we were not very successful. And but we still loved being in a band, so we carried on being in a band, and we became less serious. And now we've played many bizarre gigs over the years. Because when we went not serious, we decided that we would only ever play gigs. First of all, never play for money. That was our first rule. And secondly, we would only do gigs that were in some way bizarre, strange, or otherwise intriguing. So we've had some great experiences as a result of that. But our main gig is a charity fundraiser that we do every year in Bristol on the Love Boat, or the John Sebastian Lightship, as some people like to call it. It's been great. We've done it for about, I think we've done about 13 or 14 now. We've raised loads of money, and we've always had a great time. So,
well, indeed, and I honestly, it is the making of my Christmas. It's just the thing of greatest joy to come along on the Lightship and just watch the sort of slight loony theme of the year as you raise money, as you say, and it's just the beginning of Christmas, because you guarantee a bop, a boogie, and your Reverend Lemon personification is a genuinely very funny thing to behold.
Yes, it's very silly, and we have different theme each year, as you say. Everybody comes, lots of people come dressed up. The bar on the John Sebastian is legendarily cheap, which obviously helps. And we have a great DJ Scrimshank, who was very big on the Wolverhampton Underground back in the early 90s. And he really knows how to set the floor on fire. So you're guaranteed, as you say, your dancing trousers will take over at some point.
And legendary cheap, obviously that's what your band's raison d'etre. If you're setting out to refuse to do gigs for money, I'm sure lots of people will be biting your arm off to come and perform.
Well, exactly, yeah. Yes, we've always said that, if the gig hasn't actually cost us money, it really hasn't been a proper gig. So,
yes.
We've lost a lot of money personally as a result. We're very proud of that.
Well, it's been a privilege to be there with you as you pour your money down the drain. But thank you for your benefacting society with Reverend Lemon. Honestly, it is a thing to behold. And at the end, I'll do a deliberate section where we can find out all about Mike Akers, Reverend Lemon, and everything else you're up to. Because in all seriousness as well, you're a very sought after dramaturg, and we can talk about what that means. I know that you did the sort of collaborative penning, if you'll pardon that particular expression, of Jane Eyre for the National Theatre, amongst many, many, many productions that you've done.
Yes, I have been working in theatre as a sort of writer and dramaturg, as you say, for I guess around about 20 years. And that's been a great sort of journey as well. It's taken me all sorts of places that I would never have expected to get to, chief amongst them, backstage at the National and stuff. So it's been a great adventure, really. Yeah.
And if somebody meets you in the street and doesn't have any frame of reference, or are warmly fond of you, as I am, when someone says, "Oh, hello, what do you do?" What's your favourite way over the years of answering that?
Well, it's quite interesting. Yeah, that's gradually evolved over time, because when I first I come from a sort of background which is not arts related or middle class in any way. So I found it really quite difficult to say that I was a writer for a long time. I found it a bit embarrassing, really. It sounds quite odd. So, I was much more comfortable with saying that I was an educator or a teacher, because I guess they seemed like proper jobs in a way. But now I do say that I'm a writer, because I think that's what I am, basically. So that's how I would introduce myself, generally speaking, now.
And indeed, just looking at the various places about you on the internet, it is a very in-depth writing illustrious career, as you say, that has spanned 20 years now.
Yeah, I mean, my CV is quite kind of long now. Yeah. It's sort of I've written a lot of stuff and collaborated with a lot of different people, which is the great thing about working in theatre. I think is you get to share your time and your sort of work headspace with a lot of lovely people, a lot of creative people, a lot of people who are really kind of interested in creating something together that is
Yes.
exciting. Yeah, I mean, Instant Wit being a big part of that, because I've met so many great people like yourself and the rest of the team through working in Instant Wit.
And it is that idea of just really being in pursuance of a passion project when all is said and done. Instant Wit, similarly, has never been about, the occasional corporate gig might give you a bit of money, but actually it's just about the joy of the connection and the collaboration of doing it with some very talented people.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I had a look at your website, mikeakers.co.uk, before we started, and then rather fun, something very funny. It says on the left before the URL, "Not secure, Mike Akers." And actually,
a perfect description. Very apt. That website has been like the bane of my life since I got it going quite some time ago, but then never got around to finishing it. So it's very much still a work in progress. It's very much like the many DIY projects around my home. It seems like it's such a good idea.
What you're trying to tell us, Mike, you're a real finisher, is what you're saying.
So there is quite a lot of stuff on there which isn't actually live as such.
And about a year ago, when we were talking a lot of Latin, yes, where they do the filler.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Are a lot of your scripts including lots of filler Latin?
I think it's a big growth market. The Latin market is really going to take off. I'm sure of it.
Carpe diem and all that shebang. And yes, and these are unprecedented times. Just a real sincere question for you is how have you charted this current period in history, being a writer and working in the arts as I do as well, but how's it been for you in this phase of time during the pandemic?
Well, I think that it's been a really fascinating time. It's been a bit disturbing. I think that the pandemic itself and the consequences of lockdown, I think back in March were really kind of quite unsettling. But then it's amazing how you get used to things, and then they start to become, less sort of kind of sinister and more just a bit tedious, really.
Yes.
I mean, my personal feeling is that, that perhaps there are things happening at the moment in, the global systems particularly around the climate, which are kind of requiring us to rethink, and that perhaps the pandemic has given some powerful people an opportunity to rethink about the direction that we're going in, and maybe some positive things can come out of it politically. Obviously, a lot of tragedy for people who've been affected, health-wise, and in terms of their livelihoods, etc. So
Yes,
it's a fascinating time to be alive, I think. It's really.
it is. And it's been couched as being sort of BC and AC, hasn't it? Before coronavirus, after coronavirus, and we are living in coronavirus times currently.
Yeah, yeah. And I think a lot of the, what will be really interesting is how societies kind of reset once the actual problem of the virus is dealt with, presumably by a vaccine at some point, or, by just us getting used to it and having to get on with it.
And ironically, I'm sure you remember this too, but literally just before the zombie apocalypse, just before March, Greta Thunberg was in Bristol, and the Extinction Rebellion is one of the things we were talking about, you being slightly involved with as a writer in some regards before it all went into the pandemic phase. So are you still in collaboration with that entity?
Well, it's quite interesting. Yeah, I was down at the Greta Thunberg. I was stewarding there actually, and I stopped a fight. I was really proud of myself because there was a kid in the crowd who was a kind of an anti-Thunberg sort of protester, which I quite admired in a way. He was he had a sort of anti-Greta sign, but obviously he was surrounded by a lot of other young people who were very much pro Greta's message, and it was all getting a bit ugly. But I managed to kind of get in there and calm the situation and get him out to a policeman, because he was quite angry about the way he was being treated, by some of the people around him. So yeah, I was at that particular protest, and I thought that she was a very impressive, individual, really interesting speaker and stuff like that.
And your lovely instinct there for allowing freedom of speech, even though it was very pro Greta, obviously that day. But then I suppose in the same way one might use writing to challenge the truth, to promote free speech.
I think it's really important that you don't suppress kind of people's opinions. You deal with them through argument and through kind of that to me is the way that you kind of we develop as a kind of society and as a civilization, is through coming to a consensus about what is the way forward. And I don't think you can come to a consensus by saying to people, well, you're not allowed to think that. I think policing thought is something which is very much in the sort of ether at the moment, and I think it's really regressive. I don't regard that as progressive at all. I think that people have their heartfelt opinions about issues like climate change, for example, because that's what they believe, and you have to try and win people around. You have to try and win the argument, not suppress the argument.
Yes.
So I thought it was really brave of him to go there. I mean, it was quite provocative, obviously, which wasn't necessarily a good thing. But he wasn't actually being provoking. He just had a sign. He was just standing there with his sign. He wasn't actually doing anything provocative other than that. And he was getting a lot of stick.
Well, he probably remembers you very kindly that day too, because you swooped in and sort of rescued him.
So yeah, I had to persuade him to come out. He was quite keen to stay there, but it was obvious that could have gone the wrong way, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
Especially as he was very much an outlier in a crowd that had a very different opinion. Although obviously, generally speaking, a very peaceful crowd as well.
There's a real lovely parallel there in this sort of elixir of really good, strong writing to challenge the status quo, a bit like reflecting the Hamlet line of reflecting the mirror to nature. He was, a mirror within a different reflection, but you still embrace
I think
that.
In terms of the writing, you have to, you've got to hear diverse stories and diverse voices, and there is I think there's a danger in kind of having a sort of a cultural police, if you like, who say, well, only this story is allowed. And I think, to some extent, if you think about the whole Brexit situation, there's a problem I think this is getting really way too political. I wasn't expecting. I thought it was just going to be a laugh.
We're going to come on to the laughs as well. But it's just your integrity as a writer and as a reflector back of what's going on in society that I've always been, intrigued by and attracted to in the clarity of your writing. So there was a sort of serious intent in that, obviously.
Yeah, I think that, as I say, I think that there's, you have to air things. You have to get things aired in order to come to a consensus. And I think any sort of situation where you have one voice imposing on all other voices and saying this is the only, this is just the way, I don't know, to me that feels very anti-libertarian, kind of progressive, really.
And of course, in modern times, everything seems to have become much more binary. It's Trump, Schmump, Biden, Schmeiden, Brexit, Schmexit, climate,
What's been great to hear in terms of the American election is the way that Joe Biden has kind of spoken about unity and about trying to heal the divisions, because obviously Trump's whole thing was divide and rule.
Yeah.
And thankfully, obviously, it's been a very nerve-wracking week, especially I think both from the point of view of the climate change and the fact that Trump is really a complete denier, and obviously also from the whole sort of febrile atmosphere around the Black Lives Matter movement in America. So if Trump had got in again, it was a terrifying prospect.
Yes, so 4 years of the same wash, rinse, repeat toxicity, which would have been
much further down the rabbit hole. But what I've really found encouraging, just listening to some of the things that have been said, by the Biden camp, is about trying to heal these wounds and, to make a more kind of united sort of society, which I think is exactly what we need to do in the UK as well. Which I don't think we've been as extreme, but there has obviously the whole Brexit thing was a huge division.
And being in Bristol as we are as well, there was an extraordinary sort of historical bit of timeline as well, where the Colston statue was felled and clanged towards the water. And the joke that came into the group that I'm running called #LolVirus was the harbouring of a well-known criminal as he went splosh into the water. But it's been such an extraordinary time, hasn't it? Since March.
Yeah. Both of my teenage children were at that protest. And I said to them, that's really amazing because you actually witness to quite a historic event. Which, is not many people can actually say they were there. Something of that magnitude happens. And I think that the Colston statue being harboured, was of that magnitude.
Absolutely.
The resonance around the whole world, really. Yeah.
I remember my sort of age equivalent of that way back when was I was at a concert just as Nelson Mandela came to the UK to speak for the first time. There was a concert at Wembley Stadium, and there was just a moment when he spoke for the first time publicly. And that was just one of those really extraordinary historical moments that scorch into your brain about, gosh, I'm privileged to be here because I'm about to hear the first utterances.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it would have been kind of going to Berlin when the wall came down, but I thought about it, but I couldn't afford it.
You were there in spirit. I love that.
I was there in spirit, yeah.
And just one final question about this period of time. And have you found your muse during this time? Because you know how people have been irritating each other by going, "Oh God, I've learned Japanese. I've finished my magnus opus." And yet a lot of people I know are just really pleased that they've spent 3 days on the trot without bursting into tears or getting their pants on without falling over.
Yeah, well, I mean that was true of me before the lockdown.
Of course, you're not a finisher. That's only getting one leg in your pants. Fuck it, that'll do.
Yeah, that'll do. No, I mean, I haven't really acquired any sort of new skills, but I did really enjoy, during the real sort of proper lockdown back in March, April, just how quiet it was on the roads, and just getting out cycling and stuff like that, and down the allotment.
Yeah, and you can hear birds sing for the first time in a long time, which is lovely.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that really was quite amazing. Yeah.
And for those that's listening to the Good Listening To podcast with me, Mike Akers, the visual image is really fantastic, Mike, because I'm thinking again, you've laughed in the face of haircuts during the pandemic, and the really lovely comedy. When I must show the listeners the picture of this, you've actually got a hat in there as well, a flat
there's a hat in there. Yeah, there's all sorts in there.
It's like a badger set, and there is a flat cap.
Yeah, really, it needs its own kind of podcast, just the hair.
I mean, what's the function of the hat if we're just talking about that? Because it's there on the head.
It just contains it a little bit. I mean,
Okay.
if I release it to its full extent, as you can see, it really is. It's just enormous.
It's Rapunzel.
Across the stage.
Rapunzel.
Where I can go to a professional. If it gets too unkempt and out of hand, then I just feel too much kind of.
By the way, I think it's looking just majestic. So I think you should keep your lion Akers mane for the world to appreciate.
It's seen from space.
Yes, please.
It's a haircut of it's hair of that magnitude.
Yes.
Yeah.
Also, you're a great ping pong foil of mine in that you're always my bitch, I notice.
I know. I've never managed. I think I took one game off you once, but generally speaking,
I'm not so sure. But anyway. Anyway, great. That was a long introduction, but I love you for that. And that was my fault for asking you lots of lovely questions. So we're going to take you now into the lovely storytelling metaphors of the Good Listening To podcast, where, first of all, we're in a clearing, Mike, and it's a first of many metaphors for you to interpret. Where does Mike Akers, writer, actor, teacher, recliner, go for his clearing?
Now, the clearing is where your mind is clear. Is that where you're...
Well, it could be a physical geography or a metaphor. Someone I spoke to recently has a metaphorical sort of clearing of a cathedral in their head that they go to because they used to love singing. And so it's either something that's internal or external.
I think it's really interesting that, because I think when you're writing, or when I'm writing, writing is hard. It's not an easy thing to do. But sometimes when you're writing a script and you just kind of get into the groove, then you sort of disappear. It's really quite odd. And that, I guess, would be a good example of the clearing. You can just suddenly be like so involved in a certain, kind of conversation that you're writing, or a certain scene, that literally you just look around and an hour has just disappeared. And the only other time it happens really is when when you're a bit drunk, and it's that time in the night when it's like 1 o'clock, and then suddenly it's 4 o'clock, and you just don't know where the time's gone. It's a little bit like that.
Yeah.
Obviously, completely sober. I don't drink constantly whilst I'm writing. I should stress that.
Many writers historically have, but you can be off your chonk and come up with some moments of genius, or it's complete fucking wibble. Who knows?
So that would be one example. And I think I had this conversation with you previously about sometimes when I'm really when I'm looking to get ideas and to draw up thoughts, then I find that the cycle path is where I go, just riding my bike up the cycle path. And so many times I've been doing that ride, perhaps on the way to rehearsal or something like that, and like just an amazing idea has just popped into my head. So I find that little journey from fish ponds into town on the cycle path is quite productive. And that, in a way, is also the clearing, I guess.
I relate to that beautifully. For me, my bike is freedom. There's that joke: you can take my wife, but you can't take my bike, which is a bastardization of the Braveheart. But yes, it's the action towards as well. Just getting in, the action towards is something that resonates with as well.
Yeah. So I guess that would also be a kind of example of it. Yeah.
And the going down a rabbit hole moment when you find yourself in flow. We're going to talk about alchemy and what happens when you're at purpose and in flow later on in the conversation. But so now I'm going to arrive with you, and thank you. I'm going to assume I'm invited into your clearing with you, and I'm going to bring a tree with me for my next metaphor.
Okay.
And I'm going to shake your tree to see which storytelling apples fall out. So the slight comedy is I'm going to be running after you with the tree down the cycle path, or maybe you'll agree to stop, or I can be in your head, either pissed or otherwise, with a tree as we join you in your rabbit hole. So where do you want to be, on the cycle path or in your rabbit hole of being in flow?
Now let's be on the cycle path then, yeah.
Lovely. So I know exactly the cycle path you're talking about actually as well. So there we are on your cycle path, and then we don't block other people, but we're here with a tree. And the exercise is we've had 5 minutes or as long as you needed, Mike Akers, to think about 4 things that have shaped you, 3 things that inspire you, 2 things that never fail to grab your attention, and then 1 quirky or unusual fact about you that we couldn't possibly know until you tell us. Don't panic, Mr. Mannering. We don't have to sort of go and sort of shake the tree in a wanna. You can pick up and chomp those apples as you like on the open road if it's your tree to shake. So,
Yeah.
which apple? How do you like them apples? Where do you want to go first?
Well, should we do the 4 things that have shaped you first? We might as well just do it in order.
I like the linear pattern of that: the beginning, the middle, and the end. You old storyteller, you.
So you want me to talk about 4 things that have shaped me?
Yes, please.
That's who I am now. Okay, well, I would say the 4 things that have shaped me are, first of all, I would say, I think, yeah, it's interesting. I do this exercise. I do a lot of writing workshops, and there's a very good exercise by a guy who it's a book. I've lost the book, but I remember this exercise and his name because his name was Buzz McLaughlin. He's an American guy and he's written this script writing. But anyway, he's got this really good exercise called the Mysterious Well, which is really about where your ideas come from and what's, what is your voice as a writer? How do you find out, what's driving you? Because I think that, with writing, there are technical aspects that you can learn. You can learn to kind of, write better dialogue and, you can learn to edit and structure and so forth. But then there is the kind of the sort of force behind it, which is, I guess, the thing that hopefully AI writing programs in the future will never be able to replicate, which might mean that there are still some jobs, in 25 years' time for wannabe writers. And so this exercise is about that. And basically, you kind of write down lots of things that you can remember having had an impact on you, and then you go through a process of whittling them down until you get to one, basically. And his argument is that is the kind of driving force behind your writing.
And just say that, to position that again, you called it, it's beautiful, and thank you for gifting that back.
Yeah, it's called the Mysterious Well.
The Mysterious Well.
Which I'm very, something that's really interesting. There's a great book also by David Lynch, who's a particular kind of hero of mine, which is called, I think it's called something like Landing the Big Fish, which is all about, kind of getting into this place where you're kind of dredging up when you're at your most creative, really. And obviously he does a lot of Zen meditation, and that's his big thing. But it's the similar sort of idea, really. So anyway,
yeah.
Back to me. And when I did the exercise for myself, I think what I felt that the most significant kind of event really in my life was when losing my mum. I lost my mum when I was quite young, 16, and that I think informs whatever I've written that's been good. There's something of that in it, and it's not really about the events or the actuality of it. It's about the kind of, I guess, the emotional sort of resonance and hangover from that. So I think that really shaped me.
And it's made me think of, deep in the well of Mike Akers is the death of your mother, and there's always that ground spring of a source of who you've become.
Yeah, and she was a big influence on me because I got a big family, an absentee father, and so I lived in a house full of women, basically. There was my mum, my 4 sisters. I did have a brother as well, but he'd already left home because he was married. So I was sort of surrounded by women, and I think that had a huge impact on and shaping me as well.
It's made me think of a very Chekhovian landscape. You and 4 sisters, not 3 sisters, but
yes, yeah, no trees though. We cut all them down to make them
into car parks.
More space, yeah.
Joni Mitchell. Chekhov meets Joni Mitchell. Sorry.
So I think that my sort of those 2 things, my mum and being sort of raised in a house that was basically female,
And just one question: is your dad? You said absentee father. Is he still around and out there somewhere?
No, he's no longer with us. But he was quite a complicated character, and I didn't have a great relationship with him, to be fair.
And if I may, did that sort of reside in the end of not much respect for him either because of the choices that he made, or did you understand him? Did you make peace with it?
No, sadly, we never made peace. He was a very angry man. Basically, he was just really angry. And what really, he was, because I'm number 5 out of 6, so he was already kind of very much a kind of an established in his ways by the time I was sort of able to think about these things. And so he was never going to change, and I never really knew why he was so angry about everything, but he really was angry.
And your mother sounds like she was extremely tolerant, therefore, of that.
Well, obviously it all fell apart, and he left home when I was 10. And then they had a very long and bitter, rancorous divorce, which went on for years. And so, I think it was one of those relationships where they sort of, if they could have just agreed to part because it wasn't really working, then it would have been a lot better for everybody all around. But they sort of couldn't do it. They were kind of tied.
That's such a lovely courage in the grace of just accepting that we're going to be better off apart, which of course they didn't succeed in doing.
No, they just couldn't do it. Yeah. And I mean, I don't really know whose fault that was, but
and the truth will lie in the middle somewhere.
Yeah. It went on, and it was and obviously then my mum got ill, and probably the whole kind of the hellish sort of way that was going didn't help and maybe contributed to that, etc. So yeah.
And how many years did your father outlast your mum in the end, just in the timeline?
A long time, long time. He probably lasted at least maybe 20 more years beyond her. He was kind of, I think he was about 76 when he finally passed away. But yeah, it's a shame that we couldn't. If you were writing the Hollywood movie version, then obviously we would eventually have sort of come to an understanding, and I would have come to understand why he was so rageful, and he would have sort of probably begged for forgiveness or said he was sorry. But you never done that.
God rest his soul, as they say.
Yeah.
So sorry, I sidetracked you slightly. So that's 2 things that have shaped you, and then what's next?
I would say those. I think that my wife, Lucy, who is a writer, she had a huge influence on me, because when I met her, I just written my first play, and I was thinking, I quite like to be a writer, but I didn't have the confidence or the drive really to do anything about it. And so she really pushed me in that direction. And also I learned a huge amount from her about the craft of writing. She's a really, very talented writer herself. And I would say that she's a kind of real artist. I don't really describe myself as an artist. I think I'm much more of a journeyman.
Lovely. That's a really eloquent way to put it. Artists versus... There's artists doing both, but being a journeyman is a storyteller, which is what you love.
Well, exactly. Yeah, I don't say that in a disparaging way, but I think there is a difference between someone who, really has the kind of the muse, and that can be a blessing and a curse, I think, and someone who, has a good command of the technical aspects, which is, I think, a much better description of me and what I do. But yeah, so she was a huge influence as well, I would say. And I think the final one I would say would be having children and being a dad. I think that's been massively influential on me, and I think that's when we had children. I think that's when I sort of became a sort of grown-up person, if you like. I think I kind of struggled to grow up for quite a long time. But I think having that responsibility was really good for me.
Yeah.
and changed a lot of things about me. So yeah,
And
it's all about family, basically.
it's all about family. What are you going to do?
Soap. I should have got into soap. I think I would have been a natural fit.
Well, we presume you've got to buy quite a lot of soap. You've got a big family. And indeed, one of your children has hijacked your Zoom account because it says Blaze in the bottom left of your corner.
Yeah, so that's because I'm technically inept, and I had to get the 10-year-old to set up Zoom.
And she's done a glorious job. Lovely. I used to tease you back in the day because there is a place in Bristol called Blaze Castle, and when I found out she was called Blaze, I wondered where she'd been conceived. Against the anyway, the railings of Blaze. Moving on. So now we're going to go to 3 things, as we've shaken the tree so far. 3 things that inspire you now, Mike Akers.
Okay, 3 things that inspire me. That's a good question. I would say 3 things that inspire me are, in terms of work, is that what we're talking about? In terms of writing?
It's up to you to go where you'd like. They're your apples.
Or in terms of just life in general?
Life in general could be people, feelings.
I think in terms of work, what's inspiring is, I think, collaborating with other people. I've always found to be, really inspiring in terms of theatre. I've never really been the kind of writer who's completely comfortable with just sitting alone in the shed, kind of.
And by the way, that's where the word dramaturg comes from, isn't it? There's a collaboration and a community sort of co-writing thing, even though you are the one that produces it. But
yeah, it's sort of it's a kind of a term which has lots of different meanings to different people, I think. But yeah, essentially, it's you're a kind of one of the team that's creating the piece of theatre, and because it's sort of nebulous in terms of its meaning, eventually myself and Adam Peck, who's another great writer from Bristol who also works with Sally Cookson a lot, who directed Jane Eyre and stuff. So we changed what we were called to Writer in the Room, which I think captured for me really well the job, because you are basically being the writer, but you're not being the writer tucked away, kind of being the sort of puppet master. You're actually just one of a team of people who are very much on a kind of level.
There's that lovely resonance there also in the craft of comedy improvisation, because you walk on stage not with all the ideas, but you collaborate and create and craft the magic and the gold of what makes people laugh together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's a real relationship between those 2 things, I think.
So, writer in the room is your most comfortable definition of dramaturg in your.
Yeah, for me, yeah. I'm sure other people would disagree, because it's the kind of term that some people get quite exercised about, but I think that describes what I do much better than.
So you're a natural sort of born collaborator.
I think so. Yeah. I think that it's really. I think theatre is such a collaborative medium, and sharing that process with other people is makes us a whole that's greater than the sum of its parts, at its best.
There's a lovely generosity and humility as a through line in that, a golden thread in how I experience you as well, actually.
Well, that's very nice. Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of have to be a little bit humble if it's going to work, working that way. If you're not humble, then I think the consequences can be dire. And I have, experienced times when it hasn't worked.
Egos, shall we say?
There are times when it hasn't worked, and people have to be. Everyone in the room has to be generous, basically. That's very true. Yeah.
So, how are we doing in shaking the apples of inspiration?
Okay, so that was a work inspiration. I think that in general life, inspiration, I think, I find performing quite inspiring, I must admit. I mean, I don't do a lot of performing, but when I'm doing Reverend Lemon or Instant Wit, that always gives me a real rush. And I think, the fact that I don't do it very often is also a boon, probably for all concerned. But it means it's quite kind of special when you do it, and you know, that's something that I still have a kind of love for.
Yeah. And it's something we're both missing, I know, because I know you'll be feeling bereft of not being able to get up there as Reverend Lemon. I'm missing not being able to do as many instant wits as I have done historically over the last 20 odd years.
Yeah, absolutely. It has been a real fixture. So it is a big miss this year, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. It's a real.
I've generally filled my time with twonking a ball about in tennis as my main thing of filling, because ping pong was indoors, tennis is twonking the ball about outdoors. They've even shut that down, for crying out loud, during this period.
I know. Let's hope that it's a limited time. I think there's a month we can put up with it, but
Yes.
if it drags on, it could get a bit desperate. Yeah.
Next inspirational thing, unless we've done the three of those.
I can't remember how many we've done now. I do, you know, I love the outdoors and, you know, being down the allotment and things like that. I think just being out and about in nature. I'm very lucky where I live. We've got lovely kind of woods very close by and fish ponds. So you can.
And I didn't know you had an allotment, by the way, so I'm going to come and plunder your tomatoes.
Yeah, it was quite good this year because of lockdown. I was down there a lot. A couple of previous years have been a bit lame, to be honest with you.
Right.
But of course, that gives you the buzz. And so I've got great plans to have like a really good year next year.
I hope you do have a really good year next year. Lovely.
But,
by the way, have you seen that? There was that lovely meme that came into the LOL virus group, which was a picture of Electric Avenue. Did you see that?
Yes, I saw.
It's been added. So first of all, there's just a street. I think it's in Bristol, which is Electric Avenue, and then I'm going to lock down to Electric Avenue, and then someone's now put infection rates are higher. So it just keeps on giving. But anyway, that's a slight tangent. So now we're going to talk about two things that never fail to grab Mike Akers' attention.
Never fail to grab the attention. Well, I mean, I am a football kind of obsessive. So I will watch football anywhere with anyone playing. So that does always grab my attention. But I mean, I particularly love playing even more than watching. Mm-hmm. So it's sad that at the moment there's no opportunity to do so. So
are you a 5-a-side man or an 11-a-side man? What's your favourite way of doing it?
Well, the Recliners franchise, which is the largest veterans franchise in the UK as far as I know, is 11-a-side. So that's Sunday mornings. But I also play 5-a-side on a Monday night in a game that's been running for over 30 years.
Wow.
At Wimwell City Farm. I'm the second longest serving player there, someone who's been there even longer than I have.
And when you said a game that's been running for 30 years, are we just doing a sort of slightly more energetic mince now because you can't run quite as much as you did?
I would hate to see footage from the early 90s when I started. Now it would be appalling. Yeah. But to us at that time, it feels like it's being played at 100 miles an hour, but I think it probably isn't. And is
it just something? Is Recliners just something you're part of, or do you actually run it?
I'm the sort of the CEO, I suppose you could say.
The group captain of the Recliners.
So I also run with a couple of other people, the Bristol Corinthians League, which is the largest veterans football league in the UK, as far as we're aware.
And when you get too old, by the way, you can call it the chaise longes, and you can just be like Caesar. You can be wheeled out into the middle of the pitch on a chaise longe, as you be a ref or something.
Okay. There's a lot of potential. It can keep going, and we've got this guy who plays for us called Kaz, who he's 64, and he is probably the most enthusiastic lover of the game that I've ever met.
Lovely.
He is actually an inspiration, I've got to say.
What's his name?
His name's Kaz, Qasim Al-Akashay. He's originally from Baghdad. He's had an amazing life, kind of coming over to the UK. He's an electrical engineer by trade, or I think he's retired now. And he's just, it's like, I've never ever met anyone like Kaz. You should have him on, because he is, as I say, he's an absolute inspiration. and he's got a great love of kind of. Well, he does breakdancing, for example. He does a breakdancing class. He's got a great love of kind of poetry and architecture, and also of football. And as I say,
One of my questions that is beginning to evolve in this podcast is, who would you most recommend I talk to? So it sounds like you're giving him a good old hang, or I should speak to him.
I think he would be great. Yeah, he would be a really good person.
He doesn't know we're coming from him yet, but just say his name once again.
So his name's Kaz. Everyone knows him as Kaz, but I think his real name is Kasim Al Akashay. I'm not sure I'm saying his surname.
No, that's such a lovely name. Beautiful.
Yeah, he is brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant.
Lovely.
And as I say, because he's 64, which is really, quite a few years older than even I am, that is inspiring. So you think, wow, there can still be a lust for life.
Yes.
As you go forward, which is great, because he really has got an amazing sort of life force about him. Yeah. So that's another inspiring thing. Yeah. And music, I guess, is the other thing I find really inspiring. I've always been a big music fan and continue to be so. And yeah, so I listen to music always when I'm writing.
And what's your current sort of listen of choice that you like?
I'm really, at the moment, I'm really into, this sounds so pretentious, but I really got into Icelandic kind of pop. So there's an amazing woman called Soli who's actually coming to Bristol. She was supposed to be coming literally about 2 weeks ago, but of course it got postponed. And so now it's going to be, I think, in November of next year. But I've got tickets to go and see.
Lovely.
She's brilliant. And there's so many really interesting bands.
And you mentioned tickets plural there. I'm not fishing for a ticket, but who are you taking?
Well, I was originally planning to take Lucy, and because my daughter also really loves her. So I was planning to take everyone, but of course, who knows who's going to be available at that time?
Yes.
Because my daughter might have gone off to university by then. She's still thinking about what to do.
And one of your sons is also a musician, I know, as well.
He is, yeah. My son Eddie is a muso. Yeah, he's at university.
Eddie Akers is such a cool name.
Yeah. It's a great name, isn't it? Yeah.
It is. Well done.
Yeah, he's studying at Falmouth, and he's really following in his heart, because music was his thing from.
It's a really happy accident when you give your kids really cool names. Obviously, I've got a son called Stan because I love Stan Laurel. I love the fact I've got a daughter called Lily, because every time we say, "Please, can you pass the water, Lily?" how I laugh. We've done that. She stopped laughing quite so much.
She does too.
Could you pass me the water, Lily? The joy and rapture in my household cannot be even believed.
Interesting. When Eddie was a baby, he was a really bad sleeper, and it was just after Radiohead's album Kid A came out, and we put that on to try and soothe him to sleep, and he became addicted to it.
Wow.
So he listened to Kid A by Radiohead every night for about 9 months.
Wow.
Apart from track 3, which is the one, it's quite an ambient album, but on track 3 is quite a kind of loud, noisy one. So you had to run up quickly and skip over track 3. This is in the days of CDs.
Because he'd wake up and go, boo! And sort of
just be wailing and sobbing.
I did see something online recently where a baby was utterly inconsolable unless a particular Bowie song was on. So I think there's something about another human being's tone that can soothe or calm.
Yeah.
And that's such a subjective thing, isn't it? Like tastes in music, our taste is very eclectic.
So I always wonder whether kind of that sort of sowed a seed that kind of sent him down a particular path.
Yeah.
Yeah. He had he loves Radiohead now. He's a big fan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And awesome. And so we're going to finish now with this particular part of Shaking Your Tree. What's a quirky or unusual fact about you that we couldn't possibly know until you tell us?
Oh, blimey. What can I think of for that? Quirky and unusual fact. By
the way, I love you in the sense you are a quirky and unusual fact. Mike Akers is a lovely man.
The quirky and unusual fact, I would say, I'm really bad with these ones. Oh, I know. Oh. The first time I was on television was when I was about 10, and it was an episode of Judith Chalmers doing her travel show. I don't remember what it's called now. Holiday with Judith Chalmers. It was on the little train in Aberystwyth, a little steam train that goes up the mountain. And she was filming. She sat behind us. And so we were the kind of, my shoulder was just in shot while Judith was doing her spiel about, Aberystwyth.
And if I may, that makes you one of the original railway children, Mike.
Yeah.
Love that. I think I've been on that very same railway path, but Judith Chalmers nor you were there at the time.
No, well, you missed that. You didn't get the full experience, obviously, as a result.
That's a very lovely, cool fact. Thank you. Worth fishing for and waiting for. Okay, now we're going to move away from your tree, and we're going to talk about something you've been inferring and giving us in bucket loads anyway, but we're going to talk about alchemy and gold. When you, Mike Akers, are at purpose and in flow in the work you're here to do in life, what's that like for you? What is alchemy and gold?
Well, I think, alchemy and gold are those moments or those times when, like you said, I think being in flow is a really good way of describing it. And it's not a very exact science because I think, you can't really create the conditions for it to happen. I think it's interesting. One of the interesting things about working collaboratively and being the writer in the room in a devising process is that that's the closest I think I've come to an environment where you are actually manufacturing it. And I think it's one of the reasons why Sally Cookson, the director I was talking about, is such a kind of tour de force. It's because she has really got the magic of creating those conditions and bringing together a team and making that team sort of find its kind of rhythm and its best. It's really interesting. I think that process is so interesting. It's massively intense, and I think one of the reasons it feels so intense is because it is sort of forcing those conditions or allowing those conditions to flourish.
Yes.
The way that when you're on your own, the rhythm is totally different. So there's probably a lot of time where you're not kind of creating the alchemy.
Yes.
And then eventually you suddenly hit it, and pressure can sometimes help with that. I think a deadline is really useful. I find it really difficult to work without deadlines.
Yes.
So I think pressure is some of that, and maybe when you're in a room with a group of people, the pressure is perhaps intensified, and that maybe is what creates it.
And if I may, it's a real sort of feather in your own flat cap, if you like, that you have been over time very much part of the entourage that makes that alchemy and gold happen in the Sally Cookson, as you mentioned, arena, because you're such an integral part to that. And indeed, the plays that I've seen that you've dramaturged, stroked, penned off the back of that creative process have been some of the best moments of theatre I've experienced.
Yeah, I mean, there really has been some magic in some of those shows, and I think, that obviously Sally's got various people she works with, and it changes, but she always seems to find the magic with her team. So that's why I think that's something which you can't buy that. She's got this ability which I think kind of.
I love that idea of not being able to really know how to manufacture it, except that's the closest you've got to it. It's relatable from the fact there's no greater feeling I often experience of being right in the middle of a book you can't put down, and yet it's very, very difficult. I'm not in that place at the moment, and I'm looking for the next, because I love it when I get there, because it just takes you off on a whole different scape.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good analogy, actually, I think. Yeah.
And in fact, during the lockdown, I read a very dark trilogy about the cartel, which is really dark. But in the middle of it came this beautiful line that helped me in pursuance of what I'm all about now. Out of adversity comes great creativity. Was this lovely quote about comedy, which is we have to laugh because laughter, as we already know, is the first evidence of freedom. Yeah. And that was just in the middle of this dark book, but it was just this golden nugget that I thought, wow. And it sort of added a bit of grist to my meal with #LOLvirus, which is the Facebook group, and also now delighted to be doing this podcast based on just my love of giving people a good listening to. So but as you say, how to manufacture this stuff is what's really the challenge of how to find. Alchemy and gold is not easy to find. It takes work, effort, and tenacity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's very true.
So now we arrive at a point where I'm going to award you with a cake for gracing us with your presence here in the clearing, Mr. Mike Akers.
I'm getting quite hungry, so
get in. So nom 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 nom. It's a cake. You can choose your flavour. What's your flavour, dear?
Oh, I think my daughter made a lemon drizzle yesterday, which was amazing. So I think I'll have another.
I love that. My daughter made a lemon drizzle. Love that.
I started watching Bake Off, and it's amazing how that sort of inspires people to think, I want to bake something, and so as a result, we got the lemon drizzle, which was really good.
I noticed that you didn't bake it; she did, but you got to. Anyway, you've got a lemon drizzle cake. Love that.
Yes.
And there's a cherry on the cake now, which is the final metaphor for you to interpret, Mike, as you'd like to. And it can be a cherry that takes the form of the best piece of advice you've ever been given. It could be a favourite inspirational quote, or it could be what advice might Mike Akers give to a younger version of himself. It's open to interpretation. So it's the legacy of the conversation, how you'd like to leave us. So what would you like your cherry on the cake to be?
Ooh, that's good. I mean, you wouldn't generally put a cherry on a lemon drizzle, I don't think. But so we're already outside of the box, as it were. I think for me, looking back at my younger self, I think that I would say to him, don't be too afraid, because I think that I think where I come from, my particular experiences meant that I had a lot of fear about all sorts of different things, and I think that inhibited me as a younger person quite a lot. And actually, on reflection, there was no need to be afraid. So that's what I would say.
And I don't doubt you're counselling your own children in that exact regard as we speak.
Absolutely, yeah. Fear nothing, and get out there and do it. Definitely.
I am Spartacus. I love that. So it's been a real pleasure talking to you, Mike Akers. So where can we find out about you on the interweb? I know your website is full of Latin, as you said.
Yeah. If we want the first little bit, then you're fine. But don't sort of drill down, because you're not going to be able to understand it.
So anywhere else we can find out more about you beyond? Because I googled you and we find you. So you're there. But is there anywhere? Are you on?
I'm not a great self-publicist, so there's not a huge amount, I hope, about me on the internet. But you can find out about me just by looking for things that I've written or done, and I mean, the website's got a contact form, so if anybody happened to want to get in touch, and I do really love working with new writers and young writers. I've done a lot of kind of mentoring and development work with younger writers. So anyone can get in touch with me and via the website. Don't read the content, just go to the content.
Skip the Latin, pick up the phone. Love that. And what's the current project you're working on? What's your next?
So at the moment, I've been working on a little piece with Travelling Light Theatre, which is directed by Sally Cookson, and it's based on a short story that I wrote, because I was writing some prose, and it was going to be we were sort of turning it into a little series of films. Obviously, it's all been kind of delayed by the latest lockdown, so it's kind of gone back into hibernation. But that's what I was working on prior to the latest lockdown. I'm also running a new writing course with students at Bristol University, which I've done for the last 3 years. It's a really good little course where we develop some 10-15-minute scripts, and then some of them get a showcase at Tobacco.
Just a lovely expression there, we develop. I think you're just a natural born collaborator, and so you are the writer in the room. Ladies and gentlemen, you have been listening to The Writer in the Room. And a final question to you. Is there anything else you'd like to say, Mike, off the back of this experience of having been given a damn good listening to?
No, it's been really lovely, and it's always a great pleasure to speak to you, Chris. And you know, it's I think that it's a very good title. You are a very good listener, I think, and I do feel like I've had a damn good listening to. So thank you for that. It's always nice, you know, to get the chance to bend somebody's ear for a bit. So I think I probably did that.
Bending my ear has been my pleasure. So thank you very much indeed. You have been listening to the Good Listening To podcast. This has been Mike Akers, the writer in the room, and good night.